The room was quiet in the way hospitals are quiet at night. Not silent, never silent, but reduced to essentials: breath, machines, a clock that didn't care who was listening. On the bed lay a man who had spent his life inside brains, not as a philosopher, not as a mystic, as a surgeon. Eben Alexander knew the weight of a human skull in his hands. He knew the language of neurons, synapses, blood flow, pressure. He knew what happens when the brain fails, and what does not. Or at least, he believed he did. In 2008, in Lynchburg, Virginia, something entered his body that should have ended the story quickly. A rare, aggressive infection. Bacterial meningitis, the kind that does not ask permission. Fever came first, then confusion, then collapse. By the time he reached the hospital, his speech was broken, his awareness fragmented, his eyes no longer tracked the room. Within hours, he was no longer reachable. Doctors did what doctors do. They intubated, they stabilized, they measured pressure, oxygen, response. And then, quietly, his neocortex stopped doing what a neocortex is supposed to do. The outer layer of the brain, the part responsible for conscious thought, memory, identity, went dark. Not metaphorically, clinically. This was not sleep, not anesthesia, not a dream state. This was deep coma. 7 days. 7 days where no one expected a voice to come back intact. 7 days where recovery, if it happened at all, would likely arrive damaged. And yet, somewhere inside that still body, something did not follow the script. There was no movement, no signal anyone could point to, no outward sign of awareness. But there was experience. Not later, not reconstructed. Experienced, as if awareness had slipped past the locked door of the brain and continued on its own terms. There was distance. There was direction. There was a sense of being, not fading, not dissolving, but present. While the brain meant to generate such experiences lay offline. At the bedside, time moved forward. Monitors blinked. Family waited. Nothing moved except time. Inside the coma, something else was unfolding. And no one in that room, no nurse, no physician, no chart, had a category for what was happening then. Not yet. The story does not begin with answers. It begins with a problem. A brain that should not support awareness, and a mind that somehow remained awake. And that is where we enter. There was no sensation of falling asleep, no dimming at the edges, no gentle slide into darkness. One moment, the world fractured. Voices misaligned, faces drifting, and then the familiar frame of the hospital was gone entirely. Not replaced by blackness, replaced by elsewhere. There was movement, but not the kind that requires legs. There was direction without effort, a sense of being carried without resistance. What remained was awareness, clean, intact, unmistakably present. Not confused, not dreamlike, present. There was no pain. No memory of a body, no sense of weight. Instead, there was depth, a vastness that did not press inward but opened outward, layer by layer. Color existed without light. Sound existed without vibration. It felt physical in its own way, just not in the way the body understands. And through it all ran a single continuity. I am here. The sense of self did not fragment. It did not blur. If anything, it sharpened. There was understanding without language, recognition without names, a familiarity that felt older than memory. At times, the movement slowed, as if passing through thresholds rather than space. At other moments, it accelerated, expanding into regions that felt structured yet alive. Nothing demanded belief, nothing announced meaning. It simply unfolded. There were forms, not solid, not human, present without approaching. I was known, but not questioned. And beneath it all, an absence that should not have been possible. No thinking about experience, only experience itself. No inner commentary, no doubt. Time did not behave, not stretched, not compressed, irrelevant. What would later be counted as days did not register as duration. Only sequence, only progression. Meanwhile, in the hospital room, the body remained unresponsive. Machines breathed for lungs that no longer chose to. Medication flowed into veins without permission from consciousness. Eyes stayed closed. Inside, awareness did not return to check. It did not hover near the bed. It did not drift through corridors. It was elsewhere, fully engaged, fully absorbed. At some point, there was a sense of approach. Not an ending, not a boundary, a nearing, as if something vast allowed closeness without revealing its center. And then, without warning, there was interruption, not a gentle transition. A rupture. Sound re-entered violently. Weight returned all at once. The heaviness of a body slammed back into place. Air burned the throat. Light stabbed through eyelids that could not yet open. Confusion rushed in, not because awareness had been absent, but because it had been so complete elsewhere. The hospital reclaimed him in fragments. Voices without context. Hands without faces, and beneath it all, a lingering certainty that did not fade with the sedation. Whatever had occurred had not depended on the brain he was returning to, because when he came back, the experience did not feel like something remembered. It stopped mid-sentence. The hospital did not change its posture when he returned. Same corridors, same fluorescent hum, same charts clipped to the foot of the bed. What changed was the way those details now carried weight. Records existed. They always had. Dates, vitals, lab values trending the wrong direction. Notes written in the neutral language of medicine, measured, cautious, restrained. Deep coma, no meaningful response, poor prognosis. The timeline was clean. Admission in acute distress, rapid neurological decline, mechanical ventilation initiated. The infection identified only after it had already crossed every reasonable boundary. Bacterial meningitis, rare, aggressive, lumbar puncture results documented plainly. White cell counts elevated beyond comfort. Cultures confirming the presence no one wanted to see. Nurses remembered the stillness. They spoke later of how little changed from one shift to the next, how the body did not fight, how the eyes never opened. Family members remembered waiting rooms that blurred into one another, coffee cups cooling untouched, conversations that circled but never landed. Physicians remembered probabilities, the kind learned over years, the kind that rarely lie. They did not expect him to wake, and if he did, they did not expect him to come back intact. Neurological exams were performed because they had to be. Reflexes checked, responses noted as absent or minimal. There were no reports of dreams, no indications of partial awareness, no signs that consciousness was hovering near the surface. Monitors told a consistent story. When recovery began, it did not announce itself dramatically. A flicker, a breath that shifted, a response slow enough to doubt. Then eyes opening, not wide, not searching, opening as if returning from far away. When he spoke, the questions were not the questions expected. He did not ask where he was. He asked how long he had been gone. Later, when he could sit upright, when the fog of medication receded enough for conversations to hold shape, he asked for the records. Not out of curiosity, out of necessity. He read them carefully, line by line. He compared what was written to what he remembered. Not of the hospital, but of elsewhere. And that was where the unease settled, because the timeline did not bend. There was no window where awareness should have fit, no gap large enough to hide what he experienced. The neocortex, the very structure required to generate the kind of experience he described, had been documented as non-functional, not impaired, not suppressed, offline. The staff could confirm the coma. The labs confirmed the infection. The scans confirmed the swelling. Everything aligned. Except one thing. The man in the bed had not vanished during those days. He had not gone blank. And the records, precise, clinical, indifferent, left no comfortable place to put what he said happened when the brain meant to be in charge was no longer answering. That was the breaking point. Not a contradiction loud enough to declare itself. A quiet one. The kind that waits. After the hospital, there was a period without language. Not silence, but hesitation. Because to speak about what happened required choosing a frame. And every familiar frame felt inadequate. Medical explanations came first, as they always do. Colleagues reviewed the case. They examined the records. They noted the severity of the infection, the duration of the coma, the timing of recovery. They agreed on the facts. The neocortex, the region responsible for conscious awareness, memory formation, narrative experience, had been profoundly impaired. In most cases, that impairment leaves marks. Confusion, cognitive deficits, fragmentation. Those marks were absent. Memory testing followed. Neuropsychological evaluations, long-form interviews. The results did not suggest reconstruction. They suggested coherence. What he described had internal structure, sequence, consistency over time. Details remained stable even when retold years later under different conditions to different audiences. That doesn't prove anything. It only keeps the question alive. This did not settle anything. It complicated it, because within neuroscience, experience is expected to correlate with function. When function disappears, experience is assumed to dissolve with it. Yet here was a case where experience reported itself as continuing, not faintly, not chaotically, but vividly, during a period when the machinery required to generate such experience appeared to be offline. Some proposed residual activity. Others suggested memory confabulation during recovery. Those possibilities were considered, measured, set alongside the timeline. None fit cleanly. The questions shifted, not toward belief, but toward boundaries. What exactly does the brain do? Does it create consciousness, or does it limit, shape, and filter something already present? The case did not answer that. It didn't resolve itself. Years passed. The story remained unchanged. The medical data remained accessible. No hidden contradiction surfaced. No convenient explanation closed the loop. The case settled into an uncomfortable place. Not proof, not anomaly, but pressure. Pressure on assumptions rarely examined because they usually work. In the end, there is no conclusion offered here, only an observation. A trained brain surgeon entered a coma in which conscious experience should not have been possible and returned insisting, not dramatically, not evangelically, but steadily, that awareness did not vanish when his brain shut down. Because whatever that awareness was, it did not ask to be explained. It simply remained.